Vern has one, and if he can't hear somebody, he's going to bang the gavel. So, so keep your voices up, and we'll get along fine. I want to welcome you all here this evening. I call the meeting to order, and I want to say a few words of thanks to Mayor Doug Clark and City Administrator Silas. That's not right. Doug Hanson and Silas Clark. Okay, and Doug and I go back a ways too. So I do want to thank you for hosting us this evening. It's a great building.
Well, thank you. How many have been down here before? So a few of you, but yeah, we think it's a wonderful addition. It's 2017 when it was done. It's got our city hall. It's got obviously council chambers, but this also divides into classrooms or conference areas, and then multi-purpose, and then over on this side is our reading center. So I'll recognize Silas Clark as our city administrator. Silas actually wears two hats. He's also our economic development director and our city administrator. And then Doug Wagner, I think many of you know Doug. Doug is also on the city council as well. So I'm just going back a little bit. I worked with Glenn over the years, and Ed Ubens, I see he's retired now. And actually, Anthony Schutz, his family, and our family were from the same neck of the woods, and so our families kind of grew up together. So actually, I think my wife's related to but I want to welcome you to Hickman. Really appreciate you coming down here. Hopefully, we've got enough room. If you have time, take a look around. We really appreciate that. We've got a new stage theater going in, which they're already here. If you've not attended a performance over there, wonderful time. And I do believe Hickman is the fastest growing city in the state. If not this year, we have typically been right up there the last 3 or 4 years. So any questions for me? I'm going to turn it over to Silas to talk about a few things that's going on in Hickman here.
Okay, Silas, your time.
Yeah, just very quickly, again, thank you for having us, and we are glad you were here. The opposite, I guess, of what I've ever said. So just wanted to say a few things that you have helped us out with. We received a tree grant this year that will be going into a new park up in our northwest quadrant, so we appreciate that very much. Of course, working with your staff on hazard mitigation program, along with JEO and Norris Public Schools is along with that, which is right outside of your district, but definitely well influenced by your district, that is, but we are the fastest growing community, as the mayor said. We're just over 2,200 people, 22, and growing. We build about 30 houses a year. Appreciate being on the tour this evening. We're kind of growing towards the north, and we'll continue that path just based on sewerability. So when we welcome you down, but would take any questions, and again, thank you for being here.
Well, you are a town on the move, and I've been observing that because I take the Voice News, and it seems like every front page has got something new about something great happening in Hickman. Thank you very much. The meeting's been called to order. I've given you a welcome. Let us now rise and pledge allegiance to the flag, which is right over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, we have a current copy of the Open Meetings Act posted on a wall in the north entry at our office. I don't know if there's one here. Is there one here? Great. And so you all keep, you have the Open Meetings Act to refer to.
We know the rule.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. It's customary for us to silence cell phones, and I'm going to hold it up so you can't say that I didn't show you as well as tell you. If you do have a telephone call coming in, please remove yourself to the corridor for your conversation. We also announce when we were back in our offices that anyone who has a permit to carry a concealed weapon is not allowed to carry it into this room where the board is holding its meeting. And I don't know if you have that for your proceedings or not, Doug, but okay. As a reminder, we are taping this meeting. Am I talking loud enough? Vern, can you hear me? Got it, okay. A recording of the meeting is accessible on the NRD website. I'll call out each director by name to help document who's speaking. If you address the board, please remember to state your name. So if I say something like, Chelsea, would you please say your name for the record or something like that, please just participate and cooperate that way. At this time, members of the public wishing to address the board of directors on a topic that's not on the agenda, you may do so. If you wish to speak on an item on the agenda, please sign the attendance sheet and indicate which item you wish to speak on. I don't know that we've received anybody who signed that said they wanted to speak on a non-agenda item. I'm seeing shaking your heads, so we'll proceed to the next item. If I can find an agenda. Okay, got it. Thank you. Let's start with mine disappeared. Thank you, Paul. We'll call the roll, please. Kathy?
Aldridge?
Yes.
Amon? Here. Anderson?
Here.
Barrett?
Here.
Kell?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Here.
Miller?
Here.
Jacobson?
Here.
B. Johnson?
Here.
C. Johnson? Here. Landis? Osborne?
Here.
Peterson?
Here.
Ruth?
Here.
Smith? Schatz?
Here.
Stanger? Steiger?
Here.
Stevens?
Here.
Wilson? Here. 2 absent.
Thank you. We have had a legal notice published in the Lincoln Journal-Star of this meeting on October 4th, 2019. I would like to have a consideration of any director's absences where the director wishes to have an excused absence. I don't have a list. Landis, yes, Dave Landis is not here. Would someone like to address that? Mr. Stevens?
Move that we give Dave Landis an excused absence for this meeting.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we have an excused absence for Dave Landis. Please call the roll.
Next. Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Egan?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Elric?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schatz?
Yes.
Steiger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
Yes.
And for those of you who are not familiar with our procedure, our state statutes require a roll call with everything we do. So there's a lot of roll call going on. I don't know if your municipality does
We
or
do
not.
that, yes.
Okay. Next, I would like to review the minutes of the last meeting, September 18th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Yes, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Would like to have us review the agenda, and do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda as printed? Yes. Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. A discussion?
Osborne.
Osborne,
Out. Second.
please call the roll.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Egan? Yes. Green?
Yes.
Elric?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schatz?
Yes.
Steiger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
Yes.
Amon? Yes.
Now we'll have the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those? Now, Deborah Egan has said it. Ray Stevens seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Oops, pardon me. Please call the roll.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Egan? Yes. Green?
Yes.
Elric?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Abstain. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schatz?
Yes.
Steiger?
Same.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge? Aldridge,
Yes.
Amon,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. I might explain to the folks who aren't familiar with the NRD that we have a very strong committee system. We call them subcommittees, but just you'd be used to seeing them as committees. And so a lot of the debate is done and the consideration is done during the subcommittee, during the committee actions. So there's not oftentimes a lot to talk about in meetings because a lot of that has been done by a thorough committee review. The first committee to report or subcommittee is the Finance and Planning Subcommittee. Mr. Steinkruger.
Good evening, everyone. The Finance and Planning Subcommittee met on Tuesday, October 9th, 2019 at 5:30. The primary item that we discussed was the fiscal year 2019 audit, and we'll get to that in a minute. First, we have the financial reports that were provided to you ahead of the meeting. I would move to approve the financial reports for July 1, 2019 through September 30, 2019, and the publication of expenditures for September 2019.
Good, second.
Okay. Was that a committee motion or is that not?
It was not
Okay.
a subcommittee.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the financials. Is there any debate? Mr. Barrett.
I have just one question on page 11 of expenditures. The AEM flights for 100,000 and 90,000. I thought that these were expenditures from the previous year, or that we did this the previous year. I was wondering why they're.
Dick, you would talk about the AEM flights. I know we had some additional payments. This has been going on through a full year anyway. We had Aquageo frameworks. We paid $100,000, and then we reimbursed Laurel Platte North $90,000. Anything else to add on that?
Yeah, Dick Ehrman, NRD staff. Yeah, that's right, Vern. We did do the flights for Lower Platte South NRD in 2018, but we were part of flights that covered several NRDs. And so as those reports come through for those other NRDs, that's when the payment is made to the consultant for those individual districts.
So we haven't really paid for them before.
We have not paid for our portion of the flights yet because our report is not completed yet. Okay, those payments would have been through NRA for the other NRDs who have completed their flights and completed their reports. Okay?
Any further questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Mr. Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Gary Aldridge, A-L-D-R-I-D-G, first, one time only, okay? Some questions and some comments. I was introduced today to the Diospirus virginiana method of long-term weather prognosticating, the American persimmon theory of weather. There are whispers the National Weather Service has assigned a very high level of confidence to persimmons. On page 6, about halfway down, cover crop. This is something relatively new. Last year was last fiscal year was the first year we did this. This is the second year. Last year we had 50K budgeted and expended 4K. This fiscal year we have 100K budgeted and we've expended about 30K. So we've had budgeted in 2 years 150K and we've expended about 35K. We're going to need to give somebody a sign, put them in a gorilla suit, and put them out on the street corner to get a little bit more interest in this program. On page 7, Schedule 11, I went back and looked, Schedule 11, habitat improvement is not new, but we have pollinator grant. It says USFW. Is that Fish and Wildlife Service?
Yes.
Okay, can you help us understand what that's about?
All right, and that could, Dan was probably mainly involved in it, if I remember right, we were just looking at, getting a grant, getting some assistance from the Fish and Wildlife Service for pollinator grants. What's showing?
Again, I have no quarrel with pollinators. They're obviously important, necessary. I'm just curious about, is there some location, place in Lower Platte South that you're focusing on as far as where this will be implemented?
Not that I'm aware of, but it was something through Recreation, Forestry, and Wildlife Subcommittee that was put in there, and so it's something we'll work on, but we don't have any specifics right now, Gary.
Bear with me, in the list of expenditures for September 2019, on page 13, okay. Okay, yeah, on page 13, lower left corner says page 13. About halfway down, Kathy, under the City of Lincoln Building and Safety, there's a Visa personnel, $315. Who's the vendor? Indeed, INDEED. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or comments? You've heard the motion already by Mr. Steinkruger. No other further discussion. Please call the roll.
Miguel?
Yes.
Egan? Yes. Green?
Yes.
Elrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schutz?
Yes.
Steiger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
No.
Amon? Yes. Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Steinkruger, number B, please, item B.
Well, this is the quarter when we approve expenses for directors. So I have three more motions. And I would move to approve and publish the expenditures for directors Aldridge, Amon, Anderson, Barrett, DeKalb, Egan, and Green for September 2019. And we would need a second to that motion.
Mr. Stevens seconds it. Okay, those of you who were named in the motion, the reason we have it this way is so that those who are named in the motion aren't going to be voting on their own expenditures and per diem. So keep that in mind as you're voting. Please call the roll on those. First of all, any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Egan?
Abstain.
Green?
Abstain.
Elrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt? Schutz?
Yes.
Steiger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
Yes.
Amon? Abstain. Anderson?
Abstain.
Barrett?
Abstain.
Kell?
Okay, I would move to approve and publish the expenditures for directors Hellerick, Jacobson, B. Johnson, C. Johnson, Landis, Osborne, and Peterson for September 2019.
Any discussion? Second, yes.
Second.
Ray Stevens. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Green?
Yes.
Elrick? Jacobson?
Abstain.
B. Johnson?
Abstain.
C. Johnson? Osborne?
Abstain.
Peterson?
Abstain.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt? Schutz?
Yes.
Steinberger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Aldrich?
Yes.
Amon? Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
DeKalb?
Yes.
Egan? Motion carried.
Thank you. And finally,
And I would move to approve and publish the expenditures for directors Ruth, Schmidt, Schutz, Spangler, Steinkruger, Stevens, and Wilson for September 2000.
second, Mr. Stevens. No, can't second. Okay, someone else. Yes, Mr. Green seconds it. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Hillrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Osborne? Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Abstain.
Schmidt? Schutz? Steiger?
Abstain.
Stevens?
Abstain.
Wilson? Aldrich?
Yes.
Amon? Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
DeKalb?
Yes.
Egan? Green? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Getting that process down. All right, very good. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2019 audit. As I said, the subcommittee heard that report from HBE at the meeting, and tonight we're bringing that before the board. To start with, Peter Fellers with HBE is going to present a report of the audit. I believe you were all provided a copy of the audit in advance of the meeting, so you read as much of it as you wanted, and I'm sure most of you read all of it. So anyway, Peter's going to provide us a report at this time.
All right, thank you for having me. All right, we had a good discussion last Tuesday night at the Finance Committee meeting where we went into the numbers in a lot more detail. I will run through this PowerPoint here. This is going to be broad numbers. This isn't going to be very detailed, but if there is a question, feel free to stop me and I'll address those questions at that time. To get a little bit of background on the audit process and what we do when we come out to do an audit. Our role is to put the numbers into the financial statement form and express opinion on those numbers. So to do that, we do some planning ahead of time. We gain an understanding of the district's internal controls. We do some risk assessments. We send confirmations out to banks and to various revenue sources. Then we come out, we actually sit in the NRD office for about a week and work with Kathy and Paul and ask them all sorts of tough questions and make them sweat a little bit. And then we do some analytical procedures and inquiries. We do our final testing, and then we put all that information into the financial statement form that you guys have in front of you. The board of directors and management's role, these are your financial statements, so they are your responsibility to make sure that they're correct. Moving on to our audit opinion. All in all, we had an unmodified opinion. That's a clean opinion. That's the opinion that you're going to want at the end of an audit. There's two letters that we will go over at the end that we issued as well. All right, looking at our statement of activities here. These are all your revenue sources here. We have state grants and funds, federal grants, local grants, and then property taxes, investment earnings, and then some miscellaneous revenue that doesn't fall into any of those specific categories. I'm going to point out the federal grants and funds line. In 2018, during that fiscal year, we had to do what's called a single audit, which is where we audit federal funds that the district received and then expended. That number reached a threshold of $750,000, which made us have to do that single audit piece in 2018. So for 2019, you can see that line was only $351,000. We didn't have to do that separate single audit piece for the fiscal year 2019. So a little bit less work that went into the audit for this current year. Bottom half of the pages, these are all the expenditures that the district had. Fairly consistent from the year prior. Not nothing really too far out of line from a consistency standpoint there. Moving on to the statement of the net position and fund balance. This is, if we were in the for-profit world, would be the balance sheet. At the top of the page, we have our assets, we have our cash, accounts receivable, property tax receivable there, prepaid expenses, and capital assets. That's the physical property and land and equipment that the district has. Liabilities in the middle of the page there. We have our accounts payable, deposits, compensated absences for the employees of the district, funds held for interlocal agreements. You guys administer funds for NRA and the LPRCA, so that's their accounts that you guys hold is in that line there. We have some deferred revenue for some funds that came into the district, but we haven't been spent for a specified purpose yet. And then we have some other miscellaneous liabilities there at the bottom. Fund balance at the bottom of the page there. We have non-spendable, committed, assigned, and unassigned balances. I won't go into all the specific details of all of those categories, but basically earmarked funds get put into a certain bucket. Funds that you as a board of directors have designated for a specified purpose go into a different bucket as well. Moving on, this is a breakdown of the capital assets that the district has, broken down into what the balance was at the end of the year last year and all the current year activity that happened to get us to our final balance for 2019. I'm going to point out one line that's different from last year to this year, and that's that construction in progress line that's about in the middle there. With the Dead Man's Run project that the district is undertaking, we decided to segregate that out from the rest of the categories just because that project is going to be multiple years and going to be a fairly significant project. So we decided to pull that piece out and show it independently. All right, moving on, since this the district is a budgeting entity and also receives property taxes, this schedule is required to be included in their financial statements. So this is a condensed version of that. A lot of numbers going back and forth there, but the actual budget to actual numbers that's the most important for this page is the difference between budgeted expenditures and actual expenditures there on the bottom. If the actual column was greater than the budget column, then you guys would be in violation of your budget, which would be not a very good thing. So we can see at the bottom of the page there that our actual expenditures were less than our budgeted expenditures. So we were in compliance with our budget. All right. We started presenting this page at last year's meeting, and I got a lot of really great feedback from some of the board members that they really liked this. So I continued to bring this over. There's as we just looked at, there's certain pages that are required by every natural resource district to have in their financial statements. So I went online and pulled the neighboring natural resource districts' numbers off of their reports from the ending June 30 of 2018 and put them into this comparison here. And as you can see, the Lower Platte South, with the number of employees that they have, produces a extremely large amount of revenue compared to their counterparts around southeast Nebraska. Specifically, the Upper Big Blue NRD that has 31 employees but has almost a third of the revenue. So, good comparison to the 5 neighboring natural resource districts that borders the Lower Platte South. All right, moving on to my last slide here. We had 2 letters that were issued with the audit. The first one being a report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance according to government auditing standards. We had 2 findings that we reported in that letter. The first one being segregation of duties that within the district, and the other one being the preparation of financial statements. A little bit of background on the two categories here of significant deficiency and material weakness. Significant deficiency sounds like it's a lot worse than material weakness, but it's actually flipped around, where material weakness is the higher finding than a significant deficiency. The segregation of duties finding, we had an excellent discussion last week about how we can get rid of that finding. Working with Paul and Kathy last week, we think that we can get that finding removed with our next audit coming up for next year. The district has implemented some new procedures and checks and balances within their internal control structure that we're going to put into their internal control document, have those procedures written down and followed, and then when we come out and do our audit again next year, we'll do some testing to see if those procedures are being followed, and if they are, we can remove that finding. The other one, the material weakness over internal control and financial reporting, that one's get a little bit tougher to get around. Myself and the other staff and the partner that's on your guys' audit, we go to specified continuing education classes designed for us to prepare governmental financial statements. We have licensed CPAs in our office that are designated to work on your audit. So without having a CPA on staff at the NRD, this one's going to be almost impossible to get rid of. So a little bit of background on those two findings. The other letter that we issued is our board communication letter, and that's just letting the board know of any future upcoming changes to financial reporting, whether or not we had any issues that arose during the audit. We had no issues that happened during the audit. There is a noteworthy item that in the future, and this may go away, there's a little kind of up in the air with this new standard of whether or not leases are going to move from being reported on an income statement to being reported on the balance sheet. So that got delayed a year already. It might get delayed another year. It might get wiped off completely. So we're really not sure if it's going to get implemented or not, but we let you know just in case it actually does get put into effect. So that was my last slide. Is there any questions?
Mr. Steinkruger, are you going to present a motion first or not? I saw that, but I think he's going to do a question.
Yes, concluding Peter's report, I've got the subcommittee motion from our meeting. It was moved by Anderson and seconded by Amon and unanimously approved by the subcommittee to recommend the Board of Directors accept the fiscal year 2019 financial statements and independent auditor's report. That's the subcommittee motion.
Now, are there any questions that Karen, you had your name up.
And thank you to HBE for doing this. Welcome on the account. As many of you know, year after year, I have had concerns about the two issues that you had in your findings, the two findings. And it sounds like the first one, you have a good plan in place. And the second one, I'll have a question in a minute. But I do want to just reconfirm with the board and staff that delving into this is no reflection on our lack of trust or faith in what the audit is telling us or the way the staff has conducted our financial affairs. If anything, it's been incredibly high quality and high standard. But as a board member, and as it's very clear here that the board is ultimately responsible for what happens financially, would you just reiterate, you're going to be looking at processes internally, and that would help with that one significant deficiency. But then for the material weakness, is there anything we can do to help? That's the one that you said was going to be more difficult. And is there anything we can do to help with that?
Without having somebody on staff or on the board of directors that's certified to prepare governmental financial statements, that one's almost impossible to get around. Yeah.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I'd like to build on a little bit what Karen Raymond has just addressed there. I said this the other night, I think my thought process was pretty much paralleled by the committee, but if I misspeak, I would appreciate they would say something. But I think it's remarkable, in fact, quite remarkable, that the size and scope of our budget, when you go through that in terms of the staffing we have, that we come out with such a clean audit here. I mean, that's indicative of the conscientiousness of the staff, of the committee, and the board as a whole. I think it speaks well in terms of trying to do the right thing along those lines here. The thing that Karen has addressed there in terms of the segregation duties, I was very pleased to know that there is a possibility by changing our internal controls, we may be able to do away with that concern, and that would be a very positive step there. The other aspect that the committee did talk about, which has been a reference here, is to address that material concern there, we're really looking at either we bring a CPA on staff or that we contract some of this out. And I know that under the leadership of Dan and Paul, we'll be addressing that internally in the committee in terms of where we're going to go. I think that when you look at the size and scope of this audit, I think it's something there that we should be very proud of the staff and the internal controls presently have in place. So I do want to share that.
Thank you. I saw another hand over here. Was it Vern?
Yes, on page 29 of the audit, you mentioned numbers of times related to what Karen was talking about, what the rest of you were talking about, of these weaknesses that we have. And you mentioned that the board and the management will somehow or another take care of it. So my question is, suggestions on how this board, since we're responsible for this thing, suggestions on what is it that we can do?
Honestly, what you guys did just a little bit ago, reviewing your financial statements, reviewing those expenditures, that's exactly what you should be doing. So each time you guys sit down for your board meetings and you look over your expenses and have a question on what it is, speak up, ask the question, what is this? I don't understand why we're paying whatever vendor $100,000 or something like that. So you guys doing that, reviewing your financial statements, that's your oversight. That's your review of the information to make sure it's correct.
Other comments, other questions? Mr. Johnson, Bruce Johnson.
Yeah, I would be interested if any other NRD does have a CPA on staff or contracting in a way that would maybe be something that we could look at.
I can let you know that we are the outsourced accountant at HPE for the Lower Platte North NRD. So we do all their day-to-day bookkeeping. So at the end of the year, when the audit comes around, we prepare the financial statements with that accounting firm that comes in to audit the North NRD.
Yes, Mr. Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I printed the copy I have in front of me off of the website today, so it may be a little bit outdated. What's the date of the audit? In one place it says, on the very first page, it says 30 June. In other places inside the audit, it says October XX. It's like 20, I'm not sure. So what's the date of the audit?
The date of the audit is actually last Tuesday evening when it was approved by the Finance Committee. We put in those XX numbers within the draft form because we don't know the actual number.
I brought this to the board last year when we considered it. Last year, you may remember, at the meeting in October, the audit was presented, it was received, reviewed, and it was accepted at the October meeting. At the November meeting, I tried to make some observations or comments. I was not allowed to, so I came to the Finance and Planning Subcommittee meeting in December. And I said, we need to have the audit beforehand, reasonably beforehand, a week, 2 weeks, I don't know, so that the board members have time to digest this. Comment was made earlier about, you read this before the meeting. Yes, I did, most of it, before the meeting. What's GAAP stand for?
Generally accepted accounting procedures.
On page 2, in required supplementary information, one large paragraph, toward the bottom, it says, we do not express an opinion because the limited procedures do not provide us with sufficient evidence. Okay? In other information, the very last paragraph, the last line, it says, we do not express an opinion. Okay, fine. In other reporting required by government audit standards, again, one large paragraph toward the bottom, it says not to provide an opinion. So you're not providing an opinion, except if I go back, other information, the very first line, our audit was conducted for the purpose of forming opinions on the financial statements. And in that same section, again in the middle paragraph, I think about the last sentence, it says, in our opinion. So my question or point is, are we providing an opinion or are we not providing an opinion? I can't tell.
There's certain aspects of the audit that we provide an opinion, and there's certain aspects of it that we don't provide an opinion. So required supplementary information and other supplementary information is outside the scope of the audit as a whole. So we provide an opinion on the audit, basic financial statements, the other information, the other required information we compile, but we don't express an opinion on.
A lot of times, first opinion, people will look at me and they say, poor dear, he's so slow. And that's my wife. Can you understand why I might be confused about whether you're providing an opinion or not?
I understand.
On page, page 3, overview of financial statements, the very last sentence, statement of activities presents information showing how the district's net position changed during the most recent fiscal year. Is that an opinion or a conclusion?
This section of the report is the management discussion and analysis, which was prepared by Paul. So we do not prepare this section. This was prepared by the general manager.
On the same page, starting with the financial highlights, it goes through apparently some things that's later. Bear with me. Okay. Financial highlights on page 3, again toward the bottom. It says the district / ENWRA completed in FY 2019. The district paid ENWRA a total of $1.876 million for services. I went back and looked at the fiscal year 2019 statement of review and disbursements compared, and through June of 2019, and they show a payment of 2.1 million to the NWRA, not the figure that's listed here. So again, I'm a little bit confused about that. On page 4, is there a difference between receipts and revenues?
Yes and no.
Okay. Again, I'm looking at the bottom, and you have an area that's called receipts, and below that you have an area called expenditures. But at the very bottom, it talks about budgetary basis revenues, not receipts, revenues, exceeded expenditures. So if I go back to the receipts, is there a difference between revenues and receipts?
When you're talking between the difference between budgetary accounting and GAAP basis accounting, there's a little bit different names for almost the same item.
Okay. In that sentence, it says budgetary basis revenues exceeded expenditures by $1.369 million during the fiscal. So if I go back to the top in the actual, the budgetary basis, and look at the receipts, 12.67 million, and the expenditures, 11.3 million, and subtract the 2, does that give me the $1.369 million?
I believe so.
Okay. At the top, you have 2 columns, 2019, 2018. Are those fiscal year columns?
Yes, they are.
Okay. On page 5, fiscal highlights continue. What I noticed in here, it talks about significant differences between budgeted and actual expenditures. What I noticed in here, that it was littered with a lot of delays and problems that prevented Lower Platte South from completing or even starting some programs. Is that your understanding?
Once again, this section of the report was prepared by Paul. This was not prepared by us. Therefore, I cannot make any final decision.
Okay, that's just my understanding of what's going on in that section. Again, on page 9, we have revenues, not receipts. Explain that. Page 27. We've already had a partial discussion about this, where you talk about deficiencies and weaknesses. Deficiencies and weaknesses is not something you wish to see in a Division I sports program, sports or athletic program. You talked about how we could perhaps address these things. But going forward to page 29, were there, my recollection or remembrance of this audit compared to the last audit is that we had a total of 4 deficiencies, weaknesses last audit, but only 3 this time. Is that your understanding?
No, 3 last year, 2 this year.
3 last, okay, all right. So we reduced it. We're
Yeah.
1 better.
And maybe 1 better next year, too.
Good for us. On page 29, in the findings, financial statements audit, recommendation, it says Lower Platte South Natural Resources District's management and board of directors should rely on its review. I believe also on page 30, the same language is used. Lower Platte South NRD's management and board of directors should rely on its review. I think the order is reversed. If there's malfeasance or misfeasance or corruption, so that somebody is going to spend time in jail or get sued, it's going to be the board of directors, not staff. So I think you should put the board of directors first, because we're the ones that are responsible for correcting these weaknesses and deficiencies. Is that your understanding?
We will take note of your recommendation.
I would My experience, Gary, in litigation, everybody gets named.
Well, that may be true, but I don't think staff is going to spend jail time. That's going to be the board of directors. And finally, Mr. Chairman, it's page 5 of a letter that was, I think, sent to dear madams or sirs. I don't have the preceding 4 pages, but it's page 5 in the upper left-hand corner. It's listed as page 5. I don't know, Mike, have you found it? Other information, documents? Yeah. The very last, it's shown as a paragraph, but it's one sentence. It says, this report is intended solely for the information and use of the Board of Directors and management of Lower Platte South Natural Resources District, and is not intended to be and should not be used by anyone other than these specified parties. What do the citizens and the taxpayers and the owners use then to measure our conduct if it's only for the board of directors and management? I don't understand that sentence. I really don't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any response?
Take your recommendations under consideration.
Any
Again,
other,
you see why I might be confused.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Pete Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt? Betts?
Yes.
Steiger?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
Not voting.
Amon?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett? DeKalb?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Yes.
Helrick? Motion carried.
Thank you. Anything more?
That wraps up my portion. I would mention, we've had some just tentative discussions on a board, potentially having a board retreat, probably this winter. And if any of the directors have any thoughts or suggestions on topics that we might cover, provide those to Paul or myself. And this wraps up the fiscal year 20 budget work and the fiscal year 19 audit, and we'll look forward to the next cycle.
Oh, we are looking forward to it, yes. Thank you very much. Mr. Schutz, report of the Recreation, Forestry, and Wildlife Subcommittee.
From last to first, right?
Pardon me?
Do we just rotate? Is that how this works? I had to wait all the way to the end last meeting, and I complained about it, and now I'm first.
Same thing happened to me.
Works out all right. So we just met about an hour ago. We have a amendment to an interlocal agreement with, let's see, it's Papio and Game and Parks on the Platte River Bridge. The amendment to the interlocal agreement does a cost share on some bridge work. It allows for the study of the work that needs to be done on the bridge and allows for debris removal. The cost allocation is included in the interlocal agreement. After discussion, just briefly, it was moved by Stevens, seconded by Green, and unanimously approved to recommend the Board of Directors approve the amendment to the Interlocal Cooperation Act agreement between Lower Platte South NRD, Papio Missouri River NRD, and Nebraska Game and Parks Commission for the trail over Platte River Bridge.
That's a motion from the committee.
Yes.
Okay, so it needs no second. Do you have any discussion? Yes.
I just have a quick question. On the study that's done that, have they done any preliminary stuff to see if the bridge is structurally sound, or is that study for part of that?
No, so there's basically, Ariana, do you want to respond?
Yep.
Good, please,
So
please
Papio's-
state your name and come over to the microphone. Thank you.
Ariana Kennedy, Lower Platte South NRD staff. To answer your question, Papio's taken the lead on this project, and they're going to be hiring Shimmer to do a bridge inspection for us. So we won't know until the bridge inspection is done. And the first part of this process is to get the debris removed so that they can go out there and take a look at the bridge.
This is all from the flood, right?
Yes, from the March flood.
March flood, yes. Pardon me? Any other questions? Discussion?
Related to that, a constituent did raise the issue after our meeting, but before this meeting convened, about the extent to which we want to sign on at this point to all of the bridge repair work without any idea of how much that's actually going to cost. There's, of course, two big pieces to this project. One is the debris removal, and that's my understanding of the cost on that is that it's federally funded as well as Game and Parks, or Game and Parks is paying for that and getting reimbursed.
Yes, so FEMA funding is going to be sought out, and we're looking at 75% of that covered by FEMA, and then the remaining 25% will be covered by Game and Parks for the debris removal.
The second big chunk of it is the bridge repairs themselves, and there's three sub-pieces to that. One is the bridge evaluation, just looking at to try to figure out what we need to do. The second piece of that is a design, if we need it, and Papio will make the call on that, and that, of course, would involve engineers. And then the third chunk of it is the actual repairs. And under the language of the interlocal agreement, Papio will also make the call on that. So by signing on to this agreement, we are signing on to cover 50% of the remaining cost after federal funding for the project's repairs. So there is some uncertainty associated with it. Paul, if you wanted to respond to that concern.
Yeah, there's some unknowns as to what the inspection's gonna show and what types of repairs or what those costs are gonna be. I think we have a pretty good handle that they're gonna be somewhat reasonable. I mean, the bridge looks pretty good out there. We also have the FEMA funds, so, you know, what our share is gonna be, I think it's a manageable number. Basically, so I'm good with the agreement the way it's written. I think it'd be problematic to be changing the agreement at this point because Papio's already approved it, so we'd essentially be losing a month there for sure. So I think the way it's written is good.
Mr. Osborne.
When are they gonna start funding? Right away?
So Papio is hoping to get the contractor on board in November, and then it's sort of weather dependent. The biggest issue has been the water this year.
Yeah.
We need the water to go down.
Looking at that debris, it's pretty obvious you won't know what the problems are until you remove the debris. Anyone else? Hands? Yes, Mr. Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. One observation that deals with my friends FEMA, in the memorandum dated 10 October, it says 75% of the funding will be reimbursed by FEMA. Good for us.
Any other comments? The motion is before you. Please call the roll.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Yes.
Schmidt? Schatz?
Yes.
Steiger? Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Yes. Aldridge?
Yes.
Amon?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
DeKalb?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Yes.
Elrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Report of the Urban Subcommittee, Mr. DeKalb.
Good evening, everybody. We met last week. Mike, would you bring up the aerial on this? It's attached to that report. I know you will.
Mike, could you speak into the microphone a little bit more? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I sure
That
will.
would be whatever it takes. We just need a little more amplification.
I
Right,
didn't hear
Vern?
the hammer over here. Oh, okay. This, just to refresh your memory a little bit, we had previously looked at this. This is the replacement of 4 reinforced metal concretes that are rusting out and about ready to fall apart. And then, of course, block those drainage ways. This is located at Lincoln High School, immediately in the upper left-hand corner of your slide there. So it's on Antelope Creek, right next to that. We had previously taken action on hiring an engineer to design this and put together the materials to be able to go out for bid, which brings us to this particular item, A. Where it did go out for bid, they opened the bids last. Oh, come on now. Last week, we got 3 bids, excuse me as I go for this. We got 3 bids. The engineer had estimated that this would be $59,000 to replace these 3 with high-density plastic and get that particular work done. All the bids came in high. The recommendation of staff and engineers to accept the low bid, which was $80,105. We did talk this over with staff and the engineer, and it was moved by Anderson, seconded by Schmidt, and unanimously approved by the subcommittee to recommend approving the bid from Pat Thomas Construction in the amount of $80,105 for the Antelope Creek Pipe Replacement Project. And I might add, instead of waiting, rebidding, or anything else, we didn't expect the price to go down. It also gave us the opportunity to get work started in November and through the winter months. So that's the motion of the committee.
Thank you. No second required. Any discussion? Mr. Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My understanding is that there were 3 bids submitted, is that correct?
That's correct. They're attached to your
Were all 3 of the bidders in what I would call the local trade area? Lancaster, Sarpy, Douglas?
Not familiar. The answer, the head shaking, yes.
All 3 were from Lincoln.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Pat Thomas. Has he done work for the Lower Platte South before?
Yes, he has.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that, again, the bids, all of the bids exceeded the engineer's estimate. The low bid was $80,000. The engineer said $59,000. That's a difference of $21,000. That's 26, a little more than 26% variation. I admit that we're sometimes at the mercy of the people who are capable of doing the work. And if they submit a bid and it's different from the engineer's estimate, then we have to either take or lose it. I'm looking at a letter that was written to Lower Platte South, dated 10 October, by signed by Ross Lawrence, PE, CFM at JEO. And in a paragraph toward the bottom, it says the total price is higher than the engineer's opinion of cost, but still within reason for this project. I would like to caution JEO that we're not spending their money, we're spending tax dollars. We should never forget whose money we're spending in this case. And I think 26% is a large, very large variation. Again, apparently there's nothing we can do about it. Thank you.
Mr. DeCalvo. Yeah, I just note, we did talk about this a little bit, and especially right now, the circumstances this year with all the work out there for levee repair and flood damage repair, all the contractors have it lined up really tough, and all the bids are coming in high. It's kind of a circumstance we're all in at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, the recommendation was to go with a low bid and get it done.
Mr. Anderson.
If I can build upon the response here, yeah, you can put it out for another bid, but what is the probability it's going to come in lower than it is at this point in time? If you talk to a lot of the construction people right now, everybody is going through the same thing. It's anywhere from 24 to about 35% higher on these bids than what you would think it would be. So I don't think we're really out of the norm. Do I like it? Absolutely not. But unless we want to take that risk of having bid it again, and you don't know if it's going to come in lower or not, you don't know. And in essence, trying to move the project ahead, that's why I felt comfortable making the motion here that I did.
Thank you. Other debate, discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
C. Johnson? Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schutz?
Yes.
Stocker?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Aldridge?
No.
Amon?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Yes.
Helrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Mr.
I-
DeKalb?
Item B is consideration of Amendment 1 to the Professional Services Agreement for additional construction services on the Antelope Creek Pipe Replacement Project. This is the same project. It's basically the next step. We had, as I mentioned earlier, hired JEO to do the design and permitting. And this basically is to have them do the supervising, review, and oversight of the construction itself and putting it in place. So it's, they had proposed a price of the amendment would be $6,530. The subcommittee moved by Egan, seconded by Green, and unanimously approved by the subcommittee to recommend approval of Amendment 1 to the professional services agreement with JEO Consulting Group for the Antelope Creek Pipe Replacement Project in amount not to exceed $6,530.
Motion by the committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schutz?
Yes.
Stocker? Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Aldridge?
Not voting.
Amon?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Yes.
Barrett? Kell?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Yes.
Helrick? Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Motion carried.
Thank you. Mr. Hillary, do I see you moving toward the microphone, please?
Okay.
Please give us the report of the Land Resources Subcommittee and a consideration of the recommendations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. And, but I do want to make a crop report first.
Please do.
There has been a number of directors and people who have inquired how the harvest is going. It is moving along well. That we have now entered hopefully a time period here where things can move along correctly, and we can hopefully bring harvest to completion here without any major delays like they had in the Dakotas and Minnesota here the last couple of days. Yield-wise, visiting with fellow producers at the elevators and so forth, as at the present time, yields seem to be comparable to where they were the last couple of years. Many people have reminded me that, hey, we're doing the best first, and so things may not maintain themselves as we go along. But at the present time, the harvest is moving along well. With that, I am glad to announce that we have 7 cost share applications for assistance for installing water quality improvement practices. They are all for the NRD's Fall Conservation Program. One is located in a targeted area. Therefore, the Land Resources Subcommittee, which did not meet, however, the applications have been reviewed by the Eastern and Western review groups. All applications meet the program criteria and are eligible for cost share. Therefore, I move to approve the 7 identified applications totaling an amount of $62,588.
Second.
Who made the second? Okay. Matt DeKalb. Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Staff, could you tell me what the Retzlaff Generation Skipping Trust, we've got, Gary and I figured it out, but I want to hear the real.
It's a trust and it skips generations.
there's not information, we don't get a copy of the trust documents, but,
That's what we figured.
I'm gathering it's handed down. Okay, thank you.
Little comic relief there. Okay, any other debate, discussion? Mr. Schatz?
Do our criteria require that the land have a production history?
It's 1 year cropping.
Could you go to the microphone, please?
David Potter, Assistant Manager. At least 1 year of cropping makes the terrace systems eligible.
So do we know on these applications if they're new breakings or,
It would not be eligible, so it goes through that process through the NRCS office before.
So it can't be
No.
just brought into production, farming for a year, then we'll come in and help you pay for the terraces?
If it's farmed for a year, then it would be eligible after that first year of harvest.
Okay. Good question. Any others? You have the motion before you. Please call the roll.
Peterson?
Yes.
Root?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Schatz?
No.
Steinker? Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson? Aldridge?
You guys in production agriculture have had a good harvest moon here, haven't you?
Say, it has been very nice, yes.
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett? DeKalb? Egan? Green?
Yes.
Helrick?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Osborne?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank
Hey,
Mr.
thank
Heller.
you, and return next month for another update. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to have a report of the Integrated Management Subcommittee. Director Wilson.
The Integrated Management Subcommittee met on Tuesday, October 8th at 5 o'clock in the Lower Platte South NRD Large Conference Room. There were only 4 members present, so we did not have a quorum. One item was for consideration, and it was the amendment to the Lower Platte River Consortium Agreement, and that would be for a 1-year extension. Paul was notified on the 27th that the agreement expired on the 27th, so he went ahead and signed the agreement, and we had the meeting, and so we're agreeing on concurrence of his signature. So I propose an amendment that and it was proposed by, moved by Anderson and seconded by Peterson, and unanimously approved by the subcommittee's members present. So I bring it forward as a motion to recommend to the Board of Directors to approve concurrence of the general manager executing the amendment to the Lower Platte River Consortium Agreement, subject to legal counsel review.
Osborne, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to add a memorandum dated 10 October from Paul Zillig about this matter. And the thing that struck me and I highlighted is what Director Wilson said. The sentence that said, I reported, I assume that means Mr. Zillig, I reported that DNR informed me on September 27th that the agreement was set to expire that day. I think as much as possible we should, and at this point you are at the mercy of other people. But I think we should try to avoid those last minute things as much as possible.
Thank you. Okay, we have the motion in front of you, and I would like to call the roll.
Root?
Yes.
Schmidt? Yes. Schatz?
Yes.
Steinker?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Aldridge?
Yes.
Amon?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
DeKalb?
Yes.
Egan? Green?
Yes.
Helrick?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
B. Johnson?
Yes.
C. Johnson? Yes. Osborne?
Yes.
Peterson? Motion carried.
Thank you. The next agenda item is permit and program approvals. No action is required. Are those listed in the agenda or in some way? What is being? Yeah, I don't have that. Okay. Scheduled upcoming events and activities. I would note that we're going to have well testing night at Norris High School Thursday of next week, I believe. This is something that the FFA chapter is doing, and I know they did it at Valparaiso, or I should say Raymond, I think last year or the year before that I went up to. It's really something that you should see if you haven't ever been to them. You find the students are all engaged in doing their testing, and it's plus if you, like I am, I live on an acreage, I'm going to take my water and get her tested. Any other activities or upcoming events that we should be aware of? Mike?
Not an activity per se, but I would note that in today's newspaper, the NRD publication, our regular newspaper came out, and it had some really good, that was in the newspaper, electronic version of our website. Mike and company put it together, it's really good. It's got some good updates on Dead Man's Run and some other projects, so.
I get a lot of help.
Yes.
Good help, obviously.
And as much as we're ready to close the meeting,
No,
I've decided perhaps I should make a few comments about the one-page handout that I created.
Okay, you're moving on to that one, but I wanted to comment on it. I thought it was
Sorry.
extremely well done. If you haven't looked at it yet, it's in a new format. You have an opportunity to subscribe to it by coming in email form, and as well as getting on the subscription list for a monthly update email. That's best as I could understand it. And I would encourage you to sign up for that on the way out if you haven't already done it. I think you did a great job. Congratulations, Mike and others.
I love the historic pictures.
Pardon me?
The historic pictures are really cool.
Were you alive back then,
Yeah.
Mr. Buchanan? You were president. You were present at the creation of Dead Man's Run. Is that right?
Yeah. In the dirt that's there.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to say that I was too. It was 1967. That was pretty close. In fact, that's when I graduated from college. Any other wise comments? Yes.
Larry, briefly, the district is working with the city on the Salt Creek resiliency study. And the second meeting, Paul and I attended the first meeting. I believe there's a second meeting coming up in October that Paul will be attending with Dave Landis. And that's a stakeholder meeting and Olson's is heading up that meeting, working on the study. And the goal is really to identify, are there other existing opportunities for flood control and other measures in the Salt Creek watershed. So it's an important study, and I think they plan to do an open house later in November or December. But that's kind of where that's at, and it's something we're involved in with Olson's and the city that's going on, City of Lincoln that's going on behind the scenes at the present.
Very important study. Is the mayor aware of that resiliency study? You should be.
It's Lincoln.
Yeah, I know that.
Right.
But it's has implications outside the city boundaries. Yes. Mr. Aldridge.
Just a point of personal privilege. I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to thank the city of Hickman, the council, the mayor, Silas, and his staff for what they've done for us here. I think it's important that we take our meetings out to people who don't often get to Lincoln to see these. I also want to take an opportunity to thank the staff of Lower Platte South. They probably did some heavy lifting to get this done also.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Any further business to come before the meeting? Now, Karen.
Yeah, okay. Right, not business. The handout that I prepared, the one-page handout that's a summary of a conference I attended, is attached to the last part of the agenda. The title of the conference, which was in Norfolk, is Building a Clean Water Future in Northeast Nebraska. And even though it said Northeast Nebraska, it actually had a statewide perspective. There is a reason that it is significant to Hickman. I would have to say, of all the conferences that I have attended in the last 12 years as a board member, this was right at the top. And it wasn't just because it was in your hometowns, in your two hometowns, but that was impressive too. If you look at some of the quotations, you'll see the sense of urgency about nitrate contamination. And it turns out that a lot of us have gotten a little lackadaisical and have thought somebody's taking care of it. It's not at the top of the list of issues to care about. But there were a couple of things that people said, especially general managers from the NRDs nearby, that gave a sense of intense urgency that we must not ignore this any longer. A researcher from the med school talked about some tentative research showing correlations between nitrates in groundwater and pediatric cancers, especially pediatric brain cancer. There are other cancers. Previously, I had thought of the danger of nitrate being strictly related to binding oxygen, and therefore you get blue babies at birth, and I was thinking that was the main problem. But it turns out for our health, there are major, major implications of the pollutants in our groundwater. And now I do need to point out the very top line, when I talked about the problem is real, says that Nebraska is responsible for 62% of the nitrate contamination in the nation's groundwaters. Paul and I have talked about this. I sent him the slide where a presenter from UNL made that statement, but we both agree that that is almost impossible to believe that this state has that high a percentage of responsibility for groundwater pollution. And so I will follow up further with that researcher and talk to him about his sources, and I will add on to this document. If that 62% is correct, I will add on to this document the original source for that statement, and if it's not correct, I will take that statement out. But some of the other statements of the urgency of nitrate contamination are just as compelling and just as frightening. Now we come to the acknowledgement that we caused it. The USDA statistics on overuse of nitrates as a farm chemical are daunting, and those are well documented. And the rest of us just haven't understood the threat that's there. But my final 2 points, we really can solve it if we want to and if we commit to, and there are reasons for optimism. And City of Hickman, I believe you are collaborating with a person who is doing research about using algae. Do you want to mention that? Using algae to clean a well that is extremely polluted.
Yeah,
It's not an active well.
This is exciting. We saw, we
Yeah,
heard a
we
little bit
drove
about
by
it on
it.
the
You
tour.
did get to see
Well, but
that.
please give us.
Let's talk about some of the particulars, but
Okay.
working with Vern Powers and the group from UNL that you mentioned, but we do have a well, and we're close to, obviously, Lincoln. Vern, I believe, is also, might still be the mayor of Hastings as well. So, but he's doing, he's assisting in that project. So,
Silas, give us,
Yeah,
give us
sure.
a 2 minutes on
Nope,
this.
you bet I can. So actually, we have well number 7, which is just an emergency status. It's around 27 parts per million of nitrogen. So we actually heard, and it's a well that we haven't used for a long time. And we'd heard a presentation actually from the university and Mr. Vern Powers on removal potentially. They've been doing it in the lab of algae using a glass tube system with lights that is growing that algae within the water. It's then reducing that nitrate level down to almost zero. So we said, you bet we got a well, come on down. So we did. The council just passed agreement with the university here about a month ago, and they're planning on, and right now they're getting some prices, and of putting in a greenhouse out on a city facility, and then we're supplying them the water, of course, and electricity out there, and just really doing it as a partnership to see if this can be scalable to reduce nitrates, and then go directly into the water system would be the ultimate goal. They're also looking at the algae itself, and it comes into a dried crystal format after it's done, and they're seeing what they can do with that algae as another source of revenue for their business. So it is a new partnership that we're excited about too, and was just passed through our board.
Another congratulations to the city of Hickman.
Yes, thank you. And there are 2 or 3 other incredibly innovative approaches to dealing with nitrate in groundwater. And the final thing I'll say, in reasons for optimism, which just gave me goosebumps, 2 different groups of students from 2 different school systems, small rural schools, made presentations on what they are doing to track the pollutants in both surface and groundwater. And these are kids who don't have the big classes and lots of equipment the way the major urban centers do, but they are so committed to keeping their groundwater from being polluted that they are doing really significant work. And so, as discouraging as the first part of the handout is that I prepared, we cannot lose our sense of optimism that there really is a way that we can help make things better. But we can't be passive. We have to take the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? No more business before the board. I declare the motion for the meeting adjourned.